The Green Berets is a 1968 American war film set in Vietnam, featuring John Wayne, Jim Hutton, David Janssen, Aldo Ray, Patrick Wayne, Jack Sue and George Takei, nominally based on the eponymous 1965 book by Robin Moore, though the screenplay has little relation to the book. Much of the film was shot in the summer of 1967. Thematically, The Green Berets is strongly anti-communist and pro-Saigon. It was released at the height of American involvement in the Vietnam War, the same year as the Tet Offensive against the largest cities in South Vietnam. John Wayne, concerned by the anti-war atmosphere in the United States, wanted to make this film to present the pro-military position. He requested and obtained full military cooperation and materiel from President Johnson. To please the Pentagon, who were attempting to prosecute Robin Moore for revealing classified information, Wayne bought Moore out for $35,000 and 5% of undefined profits of the film. Plot. At Fort Bragg, cynical newspaper reporter George Beckwith is at a Special Forces briefing about the American military involvement in the war in Vietnam. Skeptical civilians and journalists are told that multinational communism is what the U.S. is fighting in Vietnam. Proof. Weapons and equipment, captured from North Vietnamese soldiers and Viet Cong guerrillas, manufactured in the Soviet Union, Communist Czechoslovakia, and Communist China. Despite that, Beckwith remains skeptical about the value of intervening in Vietnam's civil war. When asked by Green Beret Colonel Mike Kirkby if he had ever been to Southeast Asia, reporter Beckwith replies that he had not, prompting a discourteous acknowledgement of his opinion. Realizing his ignorance, Beckwith decides to go in-country to report on what he finds there so he may better his argument that America needs to stop participating in this unwinnable war. Colonel Kirkby is posted to South Vietnam with two hand-picked A-teams of Special Forces troopers. One A-team is to replace a team at a base camp working with South Vietnamese and Montagnard soldiers, while the other A-team is to form a counter-guerrilla Mike force. While selecting his teams, Kirby intercepts her SPC Peterson from another unit who is scrounging supplies from Kirkby's supply depot. Realizing Peterson's skills, Kirby promotes him and brings him onto his SF team. Arriving in South Vietnam, they meet Beckwith, whom Kirby allows to join him at the base camp, where he witnesses the humanitarian aspect of the Special Forces mission. Still, he remains skeptical of the U.S.'s need to be there. During that first evening, the unseen Viet Cong launch a harassing attack against the base camp by lobbing a few mortar shells before withdrawing, which results in little damage, but also results in the death of the American base camp commander Captain Coleman, whom was one day from going home to the USA. During this period, Peterson befriends a young native boy named Ham Chuck, a war orphan who has no family other than his pet dog, and the soldiers at the base camp. Also introduced is the ARVN base camp strike force leader Captain Nim, who was a former Viet Minh officer from Hanoi during the previous war and is now fighting for the anti-communist South Vietnamese government. He obsesses with having to kill all the stinking Viet Cong to win this war. He also claims that there is a spy network within the camp and ARVN strike force. One day, Sergeant Muldoon, while supervising a group of U.S. Seabees clearing part of the jungle around the base camp and evacuating the civilians in preparation for a potential Viet Cong attack, he notices an ARVN soldier pacing unusually outside the team house and mess hall and slugs him out. Upon interrogation by Captain Nim, the ARVN soldier denies being a Viet Cong spy, until Nim discovers a silver cigarette lighter in the ARVN soldier's possession, which belonged to a Green Beret medical specialist, a friend of Kirby's, recently murdered by the VC. After Beckwith sees Nim beat and torture the Viet Cong suspect to get a confession from him, he confronts Kirby about it. The colonel justifies the interrogation by telling Beckwith about the cigarette lighter the Viet Cong suspect had and how the VC are ruthless. killers who deserve no protection of any kind in this new kind of war. Another few days later, Beckwith accompanies Kirby and his team on a patrol to a local village in the nearby mountains. It is here that Beckwith changes his mind about the American involvement in the Vietnam War after witnessing the aftermath of a Viet Cong terror attack on a nearby Montagnard village in which the young granddaughter of the village chief he had befriended earlier, as well as the chief and most of the male villagers, are tortured and executed by the VC for cooperating with the Americans. Another evening or so later, the Special Forces camp is attacked in a mass nighttime attack by thousands of enemy Viet Cong and North Vietnamese troops. Kirby and Muldoon fly out to assess the situation. Their helicopter is shot down by enemy fire, but they are soon rescued by a patrol where they secure a field as a LZ for US and ARVN reinforcements as of Mike Force to aid the besieged camp. Meanwhile, the ferocious North Vietnamese army attack upon the SF camp continues relentlessly. Beckwith is forced to take a rifle from a fallen ARVN sergeant in fight alongside the Green Berets, as well as helping move the local villages into the camp to protect them from the enemy onslaught. As the battle rages, Ham Chunk's pet dog is killed and the young boy tearfully buries his faithful companion. Symbolically, the boy uses the stick he had used to dig the dog's grave as the tombstone. He is found by Peterson, who takes him to safety with the other refugees. As ARVN soldiers rush to their defensive positions, the stick is knocked away, leaving an unmarked grave. At this time, the perimeter of the camp is breached by enemy sappers who blow up holes in the barbed wire fences around the camp, and the Green Berets and ARVN soldiers are forced to fall back to the inner perimeter. Just then, Kirby and Muldoon arrive with the Mike Force reinforcements, supported by a U.S. airstrike in which A-1 Skyriders drop napalm on the attacking enemy troops with little success. Nim is killed by enemy artillery as he is detonating claymore mines to kill more attacking enemy soldiers within the camp's lines. By dawn, with the enemy attack still continuing, Kirby orders the troops to fall back and withdraw from the camp, which is then taken by the enemy. At a nearby LZ, more U.S. Army helicopters arrive to evacuate the refugees, and Peterson puts Ham Chuck on one of the helicopters and promises to return for him in Da Nang. With the base in VC, NVA hands, Kirkby orders an airstrike of a C-47 on the camp, which kills more enemy troops, forcing them to withdraw later that day. When the enemy departs, Kirby and his team reoccupy the destroyed camp. Afterwards, Kirby has a talk with Beckwith where the reporter admits that he probably will be fired from the newspaper where he works for filing a story supporting the American war. He then thanks Kirby for the experience and returns to Da Nang with the Mike Force reinforcements. After that battle, Beckwith temporarily disappears from the story, while Kirby meets with his superior officer as well as Kirkby's ARVN counterpart, Colonel Kai, where he is told about a top-secret mission they have been planning to kidnap a very important North Vietnamese field commander named General Pha Sun T, who is currently living in North Vietnam. Colonel Kai uses his sister-in-law, a top Vietnamese fashion model named Lin, as a honey trap to lure General T to a guarded former French colonial mansion located in a well-guarded valley deep in North Vietnam. Kirby, Muldoon, Peterson, and a handful of Green Berets, Montagnards, and ARVN soldiers are selected for this secret mission by Kai, who will be accompanying them. At nightfall, they are airlifted in a C-130 transport and parachuted into the North Vietnam jungle. After Kirby's point man, Kolofsky, is killed by a patrol of local enemy militia, all of whom he kills single-handedly, the group continues on. Muldoon, the medical specialist Doc McGee, and two of Kai's men are to stay behind at a local bridge over a river to set explosive to blow it up to prevent the team from being chased by the NVA forces. At nightfall, Kirby and the group arrive outside the guarded plantation where they witness the enemy general arrive at his plantation with Lin. After Kirby and Kai and the men kill all the sentries around the mansion, they quietly enter, subdue the enemy general with Lin's help and hoist him outside, where they put him in the trunk of his car. Kirby, Kai, Peterson, and Lin drive off, but the rest of the team is killed in a hail of bullets by the North Vietnamese guards while attempting to escape. The survivors drive over the bridge, which is rigged with explosives, but Doc McGee is seriously wounded after being shot in the back by a NVA guard. The bridge is blown up and the group is reunited in the nearby woods where they dispose of the general's car and successfully airlift the captured general out of the area by a skyhook device. While Kirby and the group advance through the woods to the LZ for the helicopters to pick them up, Peterson is killed by an enemy booby trap when he is gorily impaled to a trap of punji sticks. Kirby and his team are forced to leave his dead body behind. Back at Da Nang Air Force Base, Beckwith watches as Hamchuk awaits the return of the helicopters carrying the survivors of the raid. He realizes the toll of the war as Hamchuk runs crying from helicopter to helicopter, searching for Peterson, who is not there. Beckwith then accompanies a group of U.S. soldiers whom have arrived in the country and are sent to the war zone area. Kirby, in a touching moment, walks over to the boy and tells him the sad news. Hamchuk asks plaintively, "What will happen to me now?" Kirby places Peterson's Green Beret on him and says, "You let me worry about that. Green Beret, you're what this thing's all about." The two walk holding hands along the beach into the sunset. Cast: John Wayne as Colonel Mike Kirkby, Jim Hutton as Sergeant Peterson, David Jansen as George Beckwith, Aldo Ray as MSG Muldoon, Raymond Street, Jacques as SFC, Doc McGee, Bruce Cabot as Colonel Morgan, Jack Sue as Colonel Kai, George Takei as Captain Nim, Patrick Wayne as LT Jameson, Luke Askew as Sergeant Provo, Irene Sue as Lynn, Edward Faulkner as a CPT McDaniel, Jason Evers as a CPT Coleman, Mike Henry as Sergeant Kowalski, Craig Dew as Hamchuk, Richard Cactus Pryor as Collier, Rudy Robbins as Sergeant Parks. Realism. Although the Green Berets portrays the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese army as sadistic tyrants, it also depicts them as a capable and willing enemy. The film shows the war as one with no front lines, meaning that the enemy can show up and attack at almost any position, anywhere. It shows the sophisticated spy ring of the VC and NVA that provided information about their adversaries. Like A Yank in Vietnam, it gave a positive view of South Vietnam and their anti-communist allies. The U.S. Army objected to James Lee Barrett's initial script in several ways. The first was that the Army wanted to show that South Vietnamese soldiers were involved in defending the base camp. That was rectified. Secondly, the Army objected to the portrayal of the raid where they kidnapping a VPA general because in the original script this involved crossing the border into North Vietnam. Wayne wished the screenplay to have more development of the characters, but Warner Brothers made it clear they wanted more action than talk, as The Alamo was heavily criticized for too much dialogue. Scenes shot with Vera Miles as the wife of Wayne's character were jettisoned. Critical reception. Upon its cinema release, Chicago newspaper movie critic Roger Ebert gave it 0 stars and cited extensive use of cliches depicting the war in terms of cowboys and Indians, and being a heavy-handed, remarkably old-fashioned film. It is on his most hated list. In the New York Times, Renata Edler wrote, "It is vile and insane. On top of that, it is dull." Oliver Stone's acclaimed anti-war film Platoon was written partially as a reaction to the Green Berets. It is mocked in the Gustav Hasford novel The Short Timers in a scene where Joker and Rafterman find the Lust Hog Squad watching it at a movie theater. Film commentator Emmanuel Levy noted in his review that Wayne was not attempting to promote the cause of the Vietnam War as much as he was trying to portray the special forces in their unique role in the military. Wayne said his motive was to glorify American soldiers as the finest fighting men, without going into why we're there, or if they should be there. His compulsion to do the movie was based on his pride of the special forces, determined to show what a magnificent job this still little-known branch of service is doing. I wasn't trying to send a message out to anybody, he reasoned, or debating whether it is right or wrong for the United States to be in this war. Levy also notes that Wayne acknowledged war is generally not popular, but the soldiers are in a role of sacrifice, often against their personal will or judgment. Levy quotes Wayne, "What war was ever popular, for God's sake? Those men don't want to be in Vietnam any more than anyone else. Once you go over there, you won't be middle of the road." Despite the poor reviews, it went on to be a commercial success, which Wayne attributed in part to the negative reviews from the press, which he saw as representing criticism of the war rather than the film. The Green Berets earned rentals of $8.7 million in North America during 1968. The journalist John Pilger describes his reaction to the Green Berets in a 2007 speech he gave criticizing the media for its coverage of the Vietnam War. "I had just come back from Vietnam, and I couldn't believe how absurd this movie was, so I laughed out loud, and I laughed and laughed. And it wasn't long before the atmosphere around me grew very cold." My companion, who had been a freedom rider in the South, said, "Let's get the hell out of here and run like hell." Music. The original choice for scoring the film, Elmer Bernstein, a friend and frequent collaborator with John Wayne, turned the assignment down due to his political beliefs. As a second choice, the producers contacted Miklos Rozsa, then in Rome. When asked to do the Green Berets for John Wayne, Rozsa replied, "I don't do westerns." Rozsa was told, "It's not a western, it's an eastern." As the title song, the producers used a Ken Darby choral arrangement of Barry Sadler's hit song Ballad of the Green Berets. Rozsa provided a strong and varied musical score, including a nightclub vocal by a Vietnamese singer Bao Kien. However, bits of Onward Christian Soldiers were deleted from the final film.